Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the American Heart Association's Chief Executive Officer, Nancy Brown.
Welcome to the American Heart Association Scientific Sessions 2017, the world's premier gathering for cutting-edge cardiovascular science. We are honored that you have joined us. Over the next several days, I hope you will embrace this opportunity to engage with your colleagues and learn from distinguished medical, science, and industry thought leaders. It is a privilege for us to host this year's meeting here in Anaheim. While we are saddened by the devastation and suffering caused by the recent wildfires in California, we are inspired by the human spirit and outpouring of support that followed. Our thoughts are also with all of the individuals who have been impacted by the string of natural disasters and other tragic events that have harmed so many here in the United States and throughout the world. We are also grateful for the sacrifices our veterans have made for our country and the freedoms of those of us in the United States are afforded because of their service. In honor of Veterans Day, which we celebrated yesterday, please join me in thanking all of the brave men and women who have served our great nation. As we kick off this year's meeting, I'd like to provide a very special thank you to the outstanding and visionary work and leadership of the American Heart Association's Committee on Scientific Sessions program. The committee is led by Chairman Dr. Eric Peterson, Professor of Medicine and Director of the Duke Clinical Research Institute, and Vice Chairman Dr. Don Lloyd-Jones, Chairman of the Department of Preventive Medicine and Director of the Clinical and Translational Sciences Institute at Northwestern University. Please join me in a round of applause for Drs. Peterson, Lloyd-Jones, and the entire Committee on Scientific Sessions program. And now it is my honor to introduce Dr. John Warner, President of the American Heart Association. Dr. Warner is Chief Executive Officer of the University of Texas Southwestern Hospitals in Dallas, where he also holds the Jim and Norma Smith Distinguished Chair for Interventional Cardiology. John has dedicated nearly 2 decades of outstanding volunteer service to the American Heart Association and has made countless enduring contributions to our mission to build healthier lives free of cardiovascular diseases and stroke. He has been a leading voice in advocacy initiatives at the local and federal levels in critical areas, including smoke-free air, CPR training, and systems of care. He chaired the association's advocacy committee from 2014 to 2017. Please join me in welcoming Dr. John Warner.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the American Heart Association Scientific Sessions in sunny Southern California. Thank you all for being here and for your commitment to science, research, and advancing the world's cardiovascular health. I hope over the next 4 days, each of you will take in as much as you can, that you'll network with researchers and health professionals of all kinds, and that you'll appreciate the wide range of perspectives brought by experts in different specialties and from different parts of the world. I've attended sessions at every stage of my career, and I can tell you that there's just no replacement for being here. This meeting occurs at an important time in our fight against heart disease and stroke. On one hand, the future has never been brighter. New research areas like applied genomics and systems biology are expanding our understanding of disease and providing unprecedented opportunities to sort out the data from decades of large clinical trials, longitudinal cohorts, and new studies into meaningful subsets so we can understand more about each of our individual patients and to treat them more effectively. On the other hand, our work is occurring against a sobering backdrop. Our remarkable progress in reducing mortality from heart disease and stroke over many decades is slowing and may even be reversing. We're beginning to see firsthand how the global epidemic of obesity, sedentary behavior, and poor diets, and their effects on the prevalence of diabetes and hypertension are changing the landscape of cardiovascular risk. This increasing risk has the potential to disproportionately affect the lives of the most vulnerable and those whose cardiovascular risk we understand the least or have paid the least attention to. While the political discourse on health has occupied much of the media space since last year's AHA meeting in New Orleans, not much has changed, except that our work may be needed even more urgently. Some would say that picture is grim, and maybe it is, but we are all here today because of our commitment to improving this picture. Each year this meeting focuses our resolve on advancing science and clinical care and advocating for improvements in the health of all communities. Today I'll discuss what I believe are some keys to tackling those challenges, but first I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got here and share some of the lessons I've learned in my career and over my many years as a volunteer for the American Heart Association. I have a different phenotype than all my predecessors as AHA president. I'm the CEO of UT Southwestern's University Hospitals, and as a physician executive, I see much of the work in our medical center, as well as the AHA, through a variety of different lenses. Like many of you, I still follow and care for patients. Continuing to practice cardiology keeps the concerns and voice of the patient right in front of me every day. I know that's important to all of us, whether you're a basic scientist, a clinical researcher, or a practicing clinician. Having the patient at the center of our work is the reason we all do what we do. But first, let me go back to how I, like many of you, took the first step towards being here today. My first exposure to cardiovascular disease came through personal loss. The first time I heard the phrase heart attack was at age 6, when my great-grandfather died suddenly. Like many such victims, he had no known heart disease, and his death came as a shock to our family. Later, during my residency, both of my grandfathers died of cardiovascular disease. Losing my mom's dad hit me the hardest. He and my parents supported all my crazy scientific exploits, like the time I was sure I could raise superior smallmouth bass, and to do it, they let me dig my own 300-gallon pond. Later, much later, after my son was born and we were introducing him to his extended family, I realized something very disturbing. There were no old men on either side of my family, none. All the branches of our family tree cut short by cardiovascular disease. When I began medical school at Vanderbilt, heart disease was certainly on my mind. I was fascinated by the correlation of the physiology and the pathology. During my summers, I tried both basic and clinical research and liked it all. It gave me a new understanding of the continuum of science and medicine, how scientific discovery can lead to clinical impact. I also developed an appreciation of the diversity of experiences possible in academic medicine and saw that it provides a never-ending opportunity to pursue new ideas and interests. Next for me came residency at UT Southwestern in Dallas. Many of my rotations were at Parkland Hospital, a safety net hospital that provides great care to the poorest and the most vulnerable. Disease and urgency were front and center all the time. It's an environment where you can make a difference every day, even every minute. But then many of those patients seem to fall through the cracks of society. Nights in the urgent care clinic were especially frustrating. The lines were never ending. There was a constant pressure to address the immediate problem or just simply to refill prescriptions and move on to the next patient, and to save the real discussions about lifestyle and prevention for later. And for many of those patients, later never came. Two of my mentors, Medicine Chairman Donald Selden and Dan Foster, often spoke about the privilege of caring for the poor and how a full day or night of doing that made the drive home even more satisfying. That was certainly true, but caring for those patients and hearing their stories had to make you wonder how the system could be improved. Maybe not by a first-year resident, but the concepts of learning more from and about patients stuck with me and would surface again later. My next move was to Duke as a cardiology fellow. Being at Duke was great, and not just the basketball. That was good too. There was an amazing breadth of patients that came from everywhere with every type of heart disease. The opportunities for fellows to be part of innovative research were endless, including what was being done in the cath lab. As anyone who's been part of a cath lab knows, the patient relies on many people working together as a team. The concept of teamwork, of figuring out the right dynamics so that the pieces add up to more than the sum of the parts, was already something that was very important to me. My introduction to teamwork came through sports. In college, I was a scholarship track and cross-country athlete and part of multiple NCAA championship teams at Abilene Christian. Being on those teams taught me how much effort was required to be really good at something. Some of those guys made it to the Olympics. I discovered how much better I could be just by being around good people, and that equally as rewarding as winning was contributing to the success of someone more talented than you. In my case, that meant teaching the future Olympians math or helping them learn to write a better term paper. I learned even more about teamwork at Duke. Being a fellow and junior faculty member at such a great place at such a vibrant time in interventional cardiology was really special. It was the 1990s, the era of primary PCI for myocardial infarction and coronary stents. It was made more interesting by the fact that our teams were involved in the beginning of catheter-based treatment of valvular heart disease and congenital heart disease, things like mitral valvuloplasty and closure of atrial septal defects. That was different work. For at least some patients, successful interventions weren't just temporizing, they were cures. We also worked with patients with pulmonary hypertension, and the research that we and others did, and new drugs like prostacyclin, began to transform the lives of patients who'd previously been given little hope. The keys to this progress were innovation and teamwork, things that would be very helpful when I returned to UT Southwestern, joining many of my friends from residency who had also returned after training at other programs. New opportunities like running the cath lab, directing the cardiology fellowship program, and serving as chief of the medical staff reawakened my interest in improving the systems of care that supported our patients. These roles gave me new perspectives on how intertwined the operations of a healthcare system are with all the missions of an academic medical center, and raised new questions about what could be done to improve the health of more people. It was around that same time that my work with the AHA began to change as well. One of my special patients, Ron Haddock, invited me to join the AHA board. Ron eventually became the chair of the national board of the AHA, and through his encouragement and mentorship, I began to see the health of my community in a different way. The AHA is important to many of us in many ways, but for me, it had always been through activities like those represented at this terrific meeting, doing research, presenting the findings, writing papers, and educating. Mentorship is another key benefit of being in the AHA, and around almost every corner in my professional training was an eventual AHA leader, many of whom have stood up here and addressed this audience. It began during my summer research experience in medical school with Rosemary Robertson, continued during my residency and as a colleague with Clyde Yancey, and learning electrophysiology at Duke with Gus Grant. And the person giving the presidential address at next year's scientific sessions will be my first ever cardiology attending at UT Southwestern, Ivor Benjamin. Joining the Dallas board was my first experience of trying to impact public health outside of a hospital environment. At the time, the board was pushing to turn Dallas smoke-free, but industry had pushed back hard. There was a theory that it might help to include a prominent clinician with a personal story to tell. I stood before the city council and shared that my grandfather was a longtime smoker before he died of heart disease. Others told their compelling stories, and together we swayed the nation's 9th largest city to spare hundreds and thousands of people the dangers of secondhand smoke. This success was a piece of a much larger puzzle. The AHA has been and remains a leader in building smoke-free communities around the country. The air breathed by more than 80% of Americans is now protected by local and state laws. And this is an example of the tremendous impact that you can have working with the AHA to advocate for policy, systems, and environmental changes that can modify cultural norms and transform health. Being part of that effort helped me realize that the voices of doctors, nurses, and healthcare leaders needed to be heard within the community. Speaking to the City Council took only 30 minutes, but it helped effect a major change in a major city. And I vowed to do more of this, to broaden my involvement in my community and to make a difference on a larger scale. Another big win in Dallas for the AHA in Dallas was the creation of a STEMI network. For years, local health systems had tried to improve heart attack care in a coordinated way, but even well-intended groups of cardiologists often have trouble navigating a hyper-competitive healthcare landscape. The AHA brought us together in a different way. With support from the W.W. Caruth Jr. Foundation and the input and guidance from cardiology leaders in several other cities who've been working on this same life-saving strategy, we created a coordinated heart attack response team in Dallas that began by standardizing EMS equipment and protocols, activating cath labs from the field, and finished with accelerating care in the emergency department and ultimately the cath lab. We also created Don't Die of Doubt, an award-winning, high-impact public awareness campaign urging people to call 911 and to seek help for chest pain more quickly. All told, this work produced exactly what we had hoped: patients presenting earlier in their MIs, then entering a system more prepared to care for them quickly. It also reinforced to me the AHA's unique ability to move past barriers and to convene critical partners to transform the health of communities. While working on this project, another unexpected opportunity arrived, a different way for me to make an impact. UT Southwestern decided to build a new hospital. Right away, this was a project I felt I needed to be a part of. My colleagues and I felt like we had to make sure the voice of the patient and their families would be at the forefront of the design. And we didn't really trust those CEO types. I was asked by our president to be the physician lead on this $800 million project. That opportunity truly transformed me. It also expanded my definition of a healthcare team. In designing the hospital, we made a point of listening to everyone who would be a part of that healthcare team, beginning with patients and their families, then adding doctors, nurses, chaplains, housekeepers, even valet parkers, to make sure we got it right. Along the way, we learned many things, like when focusing on preventing surgical infections, letting the housekeepers contribute to the design of an operating room so it can easily be cleaned might actually be as important as the work of the surgeon. That life inside a hospital ought to look more like life anywhere else, using technology to connect with your friends and your family, and maybe even your hometown doctor, allowing all of them to contribute to your care and to your recovery, and that all of it should come together in an optimistic environment, more focused on getting well than being sick. We're very proud of the hospital, and we've won numerous awards for patient care and experience. The key was listening to our patients and to everyone who would live and work in our hospital. And in doing so, we created more than just a building. We actually transformed the care we deliver by truly putting patients first. Toward the end of the hospital planning, our CEO stepped down, and I found myself at an unexpected inflection point. Taking on the CEO job would mean leaving the cath lab. You don't want a guy who wears a suit all day and dropping by the cath lab to put in your stent. It was a hard call, but the opportunity to apply what I'd learned from the hospital project and from my community involvement with the AHA to impact more people more of the time was a strong pull. So I applied and was privileged to get the job. I've been in my role for 6 years now, and as I look back at things that work and things that didn't, I think the key ingredient has been one word: engagement. We are working in unusual times. Whenever we open our email or pick up a newspaper, we're confronted with potential threats to our livelihood, whether it's cuts to NIH funding or words like alternative payment models or MACRA. There's no denying that healthcare delivery models and research paradigms are changing quickly. But where many people see threats, I see opportunities. As with any time of change, some organizations, some companies, some doctors will surge ahead and others will fall behind. But I believe the winners in healthcare, and to me that means the ones who do the most for patients, will be the ones who understand that single word again: engagement. One popular phrase of this era is population health, a term that means many things to many people. But at its core, it represents one main concept: caring for people, not just trying to fix their problems. That's where I think each of us individually and the AHA collectively have our biggest opportunities. As the business models of healthcare evolve towards rewarding the quality of care we are providing as opposed to the quantity of work that we are doing, more and more of our successes will be defined by the diseases we prevent rather than by the diseases we treat. That's good news for the AHA, as for decades we've been focused on improving the cardiovascular health of populations around the world. And with cardiovascular disease being the #1 killer of both men and women worldwide, even small improvements in cardiovascular health will save the lives of many. As I mentioned earlier, our pace in improving cardiovascular mortality has slowed, and the global epidemic of obesity, diabetes, uncontrolled hypertension, and physical inactivity has finally caught up with us. While we've made great progress in acute care and secondary prevention, our efforts in primary prevention and wellness simply haven't been enough. I believe it's going to come down to that same word again, engagement. Partnering with patients and their families in different ways, listening to their challenges, and finding new ways to improve their health. In order to maximize our impact, our research platforms must change as well, involving more patients and examining their problems and their risk in different ways. To illustrate this, let me use another man in my family as an example, my dad. His father had bypass surgery in his 60s, but it's easy to see why. My grandfather smoked, had high blood pressure, and was not that active. By contrast, my dad paid attention to his health. He didn't smoke, was physically active, had normal lipids and blood pressure, and received regular care from our family doctor. Unfortunately, all that clean living didn't make the difference he had hoped. He had bypass surgery in his 60s as well. People like my dad remain a question, and the answers will come from science, but likely not just through additions to what we already know, rather by asking and answering new questions we've never thought about. That's where some of the AHA's newest research initiatives can make a difference. In our strategically focused research networks in prevention, hypertension, obesity, children's health, and women's health, our investigators are working across disciplines and across institutions to examine the continuum of cardiovascular risk in a much more comprehensive way. That same continuum is being explored in the AHA's Institute for Precision Cardiovascular Medicine, where a platform to incorporate and utilize massive amounts of genetic, phenotypic, metabolomic, and environmental data is discovering new strategies for prevention and treatments, and hopefully even cures. And one brave idea is reaching back to discover the very earliest forms of coronary disease, when it's present but not visible with conventional diagnostics, providing us an opportunity to intervene before the effects are expressed. Just as I've talked to you about the voice of a patient helping us with healthcare delivery, patients can help us to find new ways to do research as well. My research legacy offers a unique opportunity for patients to contribute to their medical history, their family trees, even their genetic material, to help us define new patient groups and look beyond the averages and medians to find people on the edges of the distribution curve, outliers like my dad. If there's one thing you take from this talk, I hope it's the challenge to expand your influence, to amplify the work that you do so that it affects more people. That's what the AHA has done for me, and that's what it can do for you. For scientists, this could mean joining a peer review committee or mentoring a young scientist at your institution, or even from another country. Let the AHA know if you'd be willing to do this, and if the AHA asks, say yes. For healthcare providers in the U.S. and around the world, if your hospital or clinic isn't part of the AHA's quality improvement programs, like Get With The Guidelines, Target Blood Pressure, or Check Change Control Cholesterol, and the AHA asks you to be a champion, say yes. If your city or country is not smoke-free, or if it needs more or safer walking and biking paths, or if it has neighborhoods without access to healthy, affordable food choices, and the AHA or one of our global partners ask you to lend your voice or your influence, say yes. The healthcare landscape is being reshaped, and it's never been more important for us to be part of these conversations. Opportunities for science have never been better, but to realize these opportunities, we need to continue to advocate for strong federal funding of research. While the debates rage on in Washington, it's important to remember that great science and quality care won't be realized until every American has access to high-quality, affordable health care. So if the AHA asks you to join us to help explain this to your elected officials in the nation's capital or at home, say yes. Earlier in my talk, I told you there were no old men in my family. I know this is also true in far too many other families, not just in the U.S., but around the world. I believe that people in this room have the power and even the duty to change that. Together we can make sure old men and old women are regulars at family reunions, that people live long enough and healthy enough to enjoy walks and fishing trips with their grandchildren, and maybe even their great-grandchildren. In other words, I look forward to a future where people have the exact opposite experience of my family, that children grow up surrounded by so many healthy, beloved, elderly relatives that they couldn't imagine life any other way. It's a privilege to be with you this week. I hope the rest of the meeting is everything you want it to be. Thank you.